Welcome to another edition of RCE. I'm your host, Brock Palin, and I have with me again good co-host Jeff Squires from Cisco Systems and the Open MPI project. Jeff, thanks again.
Good afternoon, Brock. How's it going?
Pretty good. We have today a actually highly requested topic. It took us a little while to get them on, but surely they are here. We have with us Andreas from Lustre, the parallel file system. So, Andreas, welcome to the show, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, I'm Andreas Dilger. I've been working on Lustre for about 7 years now. It's basically since the beginning, and I've been previously involved with ext3, and I'm one of the ext4 maintainers still, and been doing file system development for a large part of my career. I guess the other thing to mention, I work for Sun Microsystems, and I'm currently one of the architects of Lustre.
Okay, so could you give us a quick summary for someone what Lustre is and what its target audience is?
So Lustre is a distributed file system that's used quite a lot in high-performance computing. It's essentially a clustered client-server file system that allows the storage capacity and the performance of a single file system to be scaled by adding additional server nodes, and the main driver for Lustre is really scale, and we run on usually 7 of the top 10 systems in the world, and really the target audience is people that can't meet their file system needs, with a single, large file system server, right? So if you can do what you want with, a big NFS filer or a big, NFS server from EMC or somebody like that, that's probably a good solution. And then Lustre takes off from there when you need, 2 or 10 or 100 times the bandwidth and capacity that you can get from, one physical server.
You mentioned EMC, like NFS appliances. Lustre, is it an appliance? Does it have hardware and you buy the hardware and the software is all integrated? Or is it just software that you run on top of white box hardware? Or
It's a little bit of both. Lustre itself is just software like NFS, right? It's largely protocol and implementation. It's not standardized like NFS, but we run Lustre on a wide variety of hardware, and it can use basically any back-end disk storage that appears to Linux as a block device. So it can be hardware RAID, it can be software RAID, fiber channel SCSI, SATA disks, whatever. And the software that we we don't really sell software, it's open source, but we make Lustre available to whoever wants to use it, and then depending on your requirements, people use it as an open source product, and they install it themselves and manage it themselves on white box hardware. You can get it through resellers, HP and Cray and Dell and DDN, a number of different partners that take Lustre, and then they configure it and test it on their hardware, and then they provide first level support. And some of the vendors are looking more towards appliance, right? HP in particular, they sell they call it SFS, which is their scalable file store. They essentially sell Lustre appliances, and most of the other vendors, they sell it as part of a complete package that includes, Cray includes Lustre on their XT3, XT4, XT5 systems as the base file system. So
Okay.
it spreads the whole range.
You mentioned, Lustre targets scale. That gets a little confusing sometimes in disk systems. You talking large files, large total file system size, high bandwidth, high IOPS for a large number of small files running around. What does Lustre actually hit all of those?
It actually does. I mean, for most cases, it doesn't necessarily do the best in the case of large numbers of small files, because that isn't really the market that has been, driving the development of Lustre. We definitely target large total, high total throughput, large numbers of large files. The bigger the file system in general, the more likely it is to be using Lustre. Once you get into small files and high counts of small files, the current implementation of the Lustre protocol isn't really optimized for that, because we do a lot of work to optimize the I/O requests for large I/Os and to get the maximum bandwidth. So that's sort of one of the weaker areas of Lustre is small files, but people still use it in a general environment. Use it for home directories and things where the files aren't necessarily huge.
So, Andreas, how did Lustre actually get started? What's some of the history?
So actually, before I started working on Lustre, back in 1999, we started doing a project for Seagate that was related to object-based disk storage. And at that time, the intent was more along the lines of replacing, SATA or fiber channel. Essentially, well, I think that was probably even before fiber channel existed. It was essentially replacing SATA and SCSI with Ethernet, and you'd have object-based disks, and the file system layer would just talk to inodes on the disk, and it would handle all of the allocation internally. And so at the time, we worked out a prototype that was based on ext2, sort of split in half with the inode, sort of block storage layer underneath, and a file system level on top. But that project actually got canceled, and so there wasn't really interest in developing a whole new interconnect protocol at that time, and so it sort of sat on the shelf for a few years. And then Peter Brahm, who was the head of that project, he was tossing this idea around for a while, and took it from being a single disk kind of file system to being an aggregate of these object-based disks. And so it went from a small scale one PC kind of system to the level of handling high performance file system I/O. And at the time there was a project called the ASCII Path Forward that was looking for next generation storage solutions for their upcoming supercomputers. And Peter Brahm got a contract developing the file system for this ASCII Path Forward contract. And so we were partnered with Intel and Hewlett-Packard to take essentially this prototype, object-based file system and, increase it so that it's a client-server file